Thank you for attending the tennis conference, and we look forward to seeing you at more sessions throughout the month. Ben, take it away.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Evan. And hello, everyone. And I'm thrilled to say, welcome to the tennis conference presented by USTA Middle States. I'm happy to be here to officially kick off the tennis conference and start this session, which truthfully might be one of the most exciting sessions and conferences we've ever put together. Over the years in Middle States, we've hosted community tennis workshops and events like this for our tennis providers. This year, we planned on hosting an in-person event for our tennis community, but as you know, 2020 had different plans for all of us. So here we are, and in many ways, our conference may be in a better place than ever. We have more than 350 individuals with an incredibly diverse background registered, including more than 200 certified teaching professionals, over 100 from USPTA, and over 100 from PTR. In addition, we have participation from across the country, including 13 USTA sections, as well as international participation from as far as Argentina. We appreciate you all being here today. Where do we start? Tennis is bouncing back, and parts of our industry are experiencing new excitement about the sport. That said, we're all facing plenty of challenges this year. So with that in mind, we're doing everything we can to support our provider network and all of those who help our game move forward. That was a lot of the thinking behind this conference, to try to put something together that will benefit our providers and all the great people who are a part of that. As Evan mentioned, to any USPTA and PTR professionals out there, hopefully you are aware that many of these sessions, including this one, will be eligible for continuing education credits. If you've not done so at this point, if you are certified USPTA or PTR, please type your first and last name and what organization you are affiliated with in the chat box so we can ensure that you get your credits. As the USTA, there's a lot that we have to offer you from the local, section, and national level. Examples of that include our many grant offerings, our USTA Middle States Building a Tennis Community Financial Assistance Initiative, and much more. You'll learn more about all of this in the coming days and weeks. And in the meantime, you should feel free to reach out to us anytime with your needs. We'll be sharing follow-up materials and contact information in the days after the session, and I encourage you to reach out at any time. Back to some more specifics on our conference. This year, for the first time, we've organized a totally digital experience, which is beginning today and running with sessions each week for the rest of the month. I won't get into each of the day-to-day specifics or review the schedule here, but if you haven't already, I encourage you to visit our conference webpage and review all the sessions that we're offering. We have speakers covering everything from customer service and grants to the Serve Tennis suite of tools, which is helping many of our providers with program management, marketing tools, court booking, and custom website building. For now, we're going to focus on this current session. I can't tell you how lucky we are to be joined by Mike Dowse, the CEO and Executive Director of the USTA. Mike has been kind enough to join us today to run us through a State of the Union of sorts, to talk about the great things going on throughout the organization and also throughout the entire sport of tennis. We also have with us our incoming president of the USTA Middle States section, Rebecca Halpern, who's going to help lead the conversation with Mike after his presentation. Mike will focus on a lot that's going on organization-wide, and like I said, we're extremely lucky to have him here. A little bit about Mike before we move on. Prior to joining us at USTA, Mike Dowse served as the president of Wilson Sporting Goods for 7 years. He was responsible for the company's global strategy, corporate operations, and manufacturing across more than 160 countries. He oversaw the company's growth and productivity initiatives, including innovation, digital transformation, product development, the formation of new business and partnerships, and the expansion of Wilson's footprint in racket sports, team sports, baseball, softball, and golf. While leading Wilson, Mike was instrumental in the company's year-over-year increases in profitability and market share gains. Mike, thank you very much for being here. We understand there's a little bit of a tennis tournament going on right now, and we really, really appreciate you taking the time from that action to join us. How are you doing today, Mike?
Good, Ben, and thanks for having me, and congratulations to the Middle States for pulling together this great conference. And as you said, I am calling in, I'm actually underneath Arthur Ashe Stadium right now in one of our meeting rooms, so excited to be here. I know everyone's time is valuable, but I did put together a presentation that'll probably take 30 minutes or so, and thought it was important just to give everyone, as Ben said, a state of the industry and also give you feedback to what's happening here at the US Open. It's pretty exciting right now, and it's an unusual US Open for sure. So with that, maybe I'll take you through my presentation. I thought we'd touch on 6 different things today. Some insight from the US Open. I wanted to share with you where the USTA stands in terms of our approach to diversity and inclusion. Since mid-March, all of our worlds were turned upside down as it became apparent the pandemic was just not a seasonal flu, but much more than that. So I want to share with everyone how we approach that. And then that's kind of the current and the past, and then I want to spend some time around the USTA strategic priorities and how we're going to grow and promote the sport of tennis moving forward. Something in my first 8 months that I feel strongly about is what I call a culture of service for the USTA. And so I want to share again with the group some of my insights around that. And then we'll have a closing and Q&A with Rebecca with some questions that were submitted to me in advance. So with that, this slide's already outdated. I made this a few days ago prior to Novak's disqualification. I would have put a photo in of that as well. But really, there's some things that stand out to me, and it's much more than the US Open. As you all know, we hosted the Western and Southern here as well. And just think about that. Cincinnati being played in New York, that seems like no big deal in this new crazy world. But several months ago, that was thought impossible to ever happen. But that decision was made to move Cincinnati to New York to create this month-long bubble. I have been here 25 days along with a lot of your friends and colleagues who are in the industry. And overall, it's been great. There's some things to me as I reflect back on the 25 days that really stand out. The first one that hit the news is when we entered the bubble. We did have a positive test from a physio who was supporting one of the players. We're at about 3,000 tests at that point. So one positive out of 3,000, we felt very strong or confident that that was a great number. It exceeded our expectations. However, unfortunately, as a result of that positive, 2 of the players had to be withdrawn from the Western and Southern. The next thing that comes to mind was, the tragedy around the Jacob Blake shooting and what that meant to our country a few weeks ago, and how that was unfolding in real time. And Naomi Osaka showed great leadership in wanting to take a pause from the tournament. We were already in discussions with our board on what should the USTA and how should we recognize this moment to really help our industry stand up to the social injustice that is happening in many parts of our country. We quickly got on calls with the ATP and WTA, and as Stacey Allister would say, she's been in this industry for 25 years, and never once has all the groups gotten together and within 20 minutes made the right decision and made a strong decision very quickly. And we took a pause in the tournament. Other things that stand out as we're finishing the Western and Southern. I think many of you know, and we can share his name because he shared it publicly, but unfortunately Benoit Paire came down positive as well. And that triggered contact tracing, which unfortunately affected a few other players as well. But we've worked through that, and for the most part, we've been really happy with how our health protocols have come into place. We're now well over 10,000 tests with our Tier 1 bubble. And again, of that Tier 1 bubble in the US Open, Benoit Paire is the only one who has tested positive. So we're testing every 2 to 4 days on everyone. We're doing health checks every day, and we have sanitation and social distancing throughout the whole facility. And then I guess the other big milestone was the unfortunate situation with Novak Djokovic. But again, from a team perspective, the team acted decisively and quickly that it was the right decision. Regardless of who the player is involved, the rule is very clear. And we did make that decision to default Novak. So again, not a normal US Open, but the team is working extremely well. And at the end of the day, we're doing it because it's good for tennis. I couldn't be happier with the quality of tennis we're seeing. The matches have been fantastic. And as a matter of fact, maybe 20 feet from me outside this door, Jen Brady, I guess it is 12 o'clock, is just starting her match. So some excellent tennis going on here at the US Open. These photos also show you kind of the behind the scenes, the look and feel. We created a real athletes village, and there is a true sense of community here. Everyone knows we're in this together, and it has brought the tennis broader ecosystem back together. So overall, very happy with how the US Open is going so far. Still 6 days to go, but still very happy. Next topic I want to talk on is going to be around diversity inclusion. It's very important to our organization. And the first slide I put up here, if my slides are advancing, if you think about tennis, we do have a rich history in diversity inclusion. Some of the heroes in our sport, Althea Gibson, Arthur Ashe, Billie Jean King. But you look at these slides and we celebrate them by all means. But at the same time, I think we've squandered a lot of opportunities in the past with these great leaders. And I think we have to be honest with ourselves that our sport today is still perceived as an elitist sport, and the demographics of tennis do not match the demographics of our broader population in the United States. And that's a true obligation we have, that tennis does mirror our overall population of the United States. So what are some of the things we're going to do to build off the legacy of some of these great heroes? The first thing, it does start with messaging. We need to be clear to the world where we stand. We have a Be Open campaign, and I assume if you're on this call, you've been following the US Open and seen all the great initiatives we have. On opening night, we celebrated the Black Lives Matter movement. We've since then have celebrated the original 9. We're also recognizing all the frontline responders here in New York, which was the epicenter of COVID, recognizing our police heroes, the fire departments, and our medical workers, and many other great initiatives. But it's super important that, again, we tell the world and let the world know that tennis is one of the most diverse and inclusive sports out there. But it's so much more than messaging, right? We can just talk about it, but we need to have actions. And frankly, that's where we need to up our game, is in our actions. Our history is pretty strong. Our messaging is strong. But going forward, we have to be stronger in our actions. Again, here are some of the vignettes that speak to the messaging we've been having around the US Open. But some of the actions we're taking right away is we're in the process of hiring a Chief Diversity Inclusion Officer. That position's been open for a couple of years, and that's unexcusable. We have to have that person in place. So we have a search committee actively looking for this person right now. And our priority is to find the right person, and the second priority is to do it quickly. During this period, we didn't want to wait for our new Chief Diversity Inclusion Officer. So we hired Dr. Janet Taylor to come in and do diversity inclusion training for the USTA. Every employee in the USTA has been charged with attending her classes at the national level. We've then made her resources available to our 17 sections, and I'm excited to say most of our sections have been engaging in this and participating in it. We've also done a deep dive with our current diversity and inclusion team to do a SWOT analysis of the broader organization. So when our new D&I leader comes in, he or she will have somewhat of a framework or baseline of what our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So our D&I team, led by Donna Gordon and Bill Leong, have done a great job doing the SWOT analysis. I'm going to talk about Tennis Industry United in a few minutes, but we've also invited the American Tennis Association to be part of it, and that's been a great partnership so far. And then also, I've touched on it earlier, it's been the pinnacle and focus of our Be Open campaign around the US Open. So a lot of work done in this area, but I have to be the first to say we have a lot more work to do. But I will tell you, in the role I have as the leader of the organization, 100% committed to improving at all levels of the organization. And to me, it starts with the board, then it goes to the staff, and then it goes to our sections, and then it goes to our volunteer base, and then ultimately to the tennis playing population. We have to hold ourselves accountable at all levels to be a diverse and inclusive organization. Next, I want to talk about these turbulent times, because none of us ever had imagined in our lives that we'd be going through something like we are now with the pandemic. And it hit us relatively fast and hard in mid-March. So in mid-March, when we realized that this was very serious and tennis clubs started closing down and tennis facilities started closing down immediately, and that we had to cancel our annual meeting, we knew we had to quickly be focused and put specific programs in place to assure our sport was going to come out of this okay. But it all started under the umbrella of the title on this slide, is our 5 initiatives didn't matter unless we couldn't protect the health and well-being of tennis players, the volunteers, staff, and our communities in general. So we created a medical advisory group. Many of you might know Brian Hainline, who's one of our volunteers, board member, chief medical officer of the NCAA. Brian Hainline, or Dr. Hainline, along with 4 other doctors, we created this medical advisory group that we've met with on a weekly basis. And now they're here at the US Open helping us. So they were our guiding principle whenever we went through these programs. Are we doing things correctly to protect the health of everyone? So our first team, our project group, was focused around business continuity. We knew as revenues were dropping dramatically in our industry, we had to do everything we can to keep our business going, because we know we're going to get through this pandemic, but we had to be still standing once we got through it. Secondly, there's so many great people in our industry, but everyone knows we have a history of being very separated and splintered. We had to bring the industry together because we knew we'd be stronger together than separately. So we created Tennis Industry United. We also knew in March that there might be a chance that the US Open, the Western and Southern, and our US Open series might be affected. But think about our paradigm and our view back in March. We thought this might be over in 60, 90 days, but we did know there was a potential threat. And thank goodness we took that approach in March, because we put some serious planning together for the US Open starting in March with literally a dozen scenarios, half a dozen real serious scenarios, anywhere from moving the tournament to canceling it to everything in between. The next area we looked at is our 17 sections and districts and community tennis organizations. How can we help those organizations through this time? So we started to explore what we call section support and shared services. And then last but not least, we have nearly 700,000 league players and thousands of tournaments. We needed to have clear policies around our leagues and our USTA programs so we could provide clarity to the industry on how we were going to approach this pandemic. So those were our 5 work streams, and I have one slide on each work stream just to share with you what we've accomplished and what we've been focused on. The first thing we had to do, and this at the time was not an easy decision, but in hindsight, it was absolutely the right decision. Within about 10 days of the conference happening, we canceled our annual meeting, which generally has between 800 and 1,000 people there. We quickly went to work from home protocols for all the various USTA offices. It was a tough decision, but a right decision. We took salary reductions for middle management and above throughout the organization, and unfortunately, we had to furlough some people as well. We had some big initiatives that we were going to invest in, and we froze all those initiatives at the time. And then, part of me coming in January was to align our structure of the organization against USTA. That process was happening, but it got even accelerated in light of the pandemic. And we ultimately ended up downsizing our organization by 25%. So it was a pretty big change for the organization. So all those things fell under what we call business continuity. Our second work stream, and I touched on it earlier, was around Tennis Industry United. As I took this job, I quickly went on a listening tour and literally had a couple hundred telephone interviews with people even before I started the job. And what stood out to me with all the organizations or industry, we all had the same passion for tennis. We all had the same desire to grow it, but we rarely talked with each other. So as the pandemic hit, it quickly became apparent we had to work together. So we made quick calls to John Embry at the USPTA, Dan Santorum at PTR, Tim Russell at ITA, Jeff Williams at the TIA, and now recently, as I mentioned earlier, we brought in Roxanne from the American Tennis Association. And I couldn't be happier with how this group has worked together. When we initially formed in March, we were meeting on a weekly basis, sometimes daily basis. And now we've hit a rhythm where we're having meetings every 2 weeks, and it's been really helpful. And things that came out of that right away, and this seems like a lifetime ago, but the group quickly put together curriculum around how tennis professionals, tennis facilities, anyone in our industry could get access to government assistance at the time. We quickly reallocated those funds. As I talked about earlier, we stopped some investments at the USTA, took our furloughs and our salary reductions, took that money and redeployed it towards our tennis facilities. Because at the time, end of March, nearly 90% of tennis facilities in the United States were closed. We knew it was a crisis and we had to address it. We also took those funds, and as teaching professionals on the call here, we know it was tough. If the facilities are closed, there's no work opportunities. So what could we do to help our partners at the USPTA and PTR? So the best way we came to is can we cover memberships for the next year and potentially next 2 years? And then also we had to keep kids playing and people playing in general. So our team worked together across the board to come up with robust curriculum at home for at-home tennis. And then PTR through this became fully accredited along with USPTA, who had been fully accredited the year before. So think about that in 3 or 4 months, a lot of great work as a collective group in the industry. Next thing, Western and Southern Open, the US Open, and US Open Series. So, unfortunately, the US Open Series didn't happen this year. But as I mentioned earlier, the Western and Southern did here. Again, I think it's just crazy that we say Cincinnati was played in New York and the US Open. But to go through all those scenarios, we said there's 3 principles we have to check, and in this order. First, can we host these 2 tournaments in a safe way? Safe for the players, safe for our staff, and safe for the community of New York up here. And then secondly, is it in the best interest of tennis? Is it good for our sport to do this? And in 3, does it financially make sense? And definition of financially, does it make sense? Does it make sense for the players financially? And we're able to say yes. Does it make financial sense for the USTA? Well, frankly, our net operating income is down 80%, but we're able to still turn a small profit and take that money and use that money to redeploy it to our sections. And then financially, does it make sense for the broader tennis ecosystem? Does it drive participation? Does it drive excitement for our sports? It drives sales of equipment at tennis pro shops, drives lessons, drives court time, etc. And I think we all know the answers. When these great athletes are on the stage of the US Open, it's good for our industry. So fortunately, we've been able to check those 3 boxes still today. I think we're here on September 8th, and we're continuing to measure and hold ourselves accountable to those 3 principles. And then our 4th work stream, which has started primarily as a USTA initiative, can we help our sections weather this storm as well? But we also want this to now transition to the broader industry. Are there things we can do better together? Whether it's insurance policies, whether it's social media platforms, anything what I call middle and back room that's an expense by people. Sometimes there's a lot of scale and synergy to be had if we do it together rather than all of us paying for it individually. So we've got teams working diligently against that to see if there's opportunities that'll allow us to free up funds to really spend them on getting in front of tennis players and getting people to play tennis, as opposed to putting that funds against operational matters. So still a lot of work to go here, but a good head start by the team on this. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, we have nearly 700,000 people playing league tennis, thousands of tournaments. We had to have a very disciplined approach on how we do this in a health and safety way. And I think everyone knows on March 15th, we put a pause on all USTA programs, through June 1st. And then on June 1st, we really realized local play was going to be different at all the sections. Each government entity had different approaches to the pandemic, and frankly, the pandemic was at a different level in each area. So we went to local play then, which I thought was great. But we did have to pause national play as it impacted people flying across the country, and we just couldn't afford to do that in a safe way. So those were our 5 work streams. I think we've managed them very well, and we're continuing to run those work streams as needed. But I think for the most part, we have our cadence in place, and we're doing well. So I'm doing a lot of talking here, and I apologize for that, but I want to blow through this so we can get to the questions. The next area I want to talk about is USTA strategic priorities. So some of you may know we have 5 strategic priorities. These were authored before I arrived in the position, but I will tell you, I support them 100%. They were done in a very collaborative approach. My understanding is there was thousands of interviews to get to these 5 strategic priorities. The first one was attract, engage, and retain a new generation of diverse tennis players. I don't think anyone can disagree that that's our most important strategic choice. How do we attract? Not just attract, but engage and retain a new generation of diverse tennis players. Secondly, we have to improve our industry-wide improvement to the tennis delivery system. We know tennis has somewhat of a steep learning curve, and as people come in, if they don't have a good experience initially, they leave our sport. We have to be better at that when people come in and have a great experience. I joke around when I was appointed to this position, one of the #1 complaints I received from the facility I play at is fix the website. Our Tennis Link system was really old and outdated. So our team's been working extremely hard to improve our digital platform, and our new Serve Tennis platform is being rolled out as we speak. And we have a long ways to go in the digital world, but no, We did this in my previous employer, and we're going to do it here and make the USTA a world-class digital platform. We talk about the financial growth of the USTA, and that's primarily through the US Open. And as I mentioned earlier, big challenge this year. But if we don't get that right, we can't do the other things on this, on our strategic initiative. So key that we continue to execute against the US Open and make sure that's financially healthy. And then the fifth strategic choice is collaboration amongst the USTA and the broader tennis ecosystem. And to me, I always say we're in the business of promoting and growing the sport of tennis, not just promoting and growing the sport of USTA tennis. And I think you can see over the last 8 months, we're living up to that strategic choice by really trying to include the whole industry in everything we do. So I've talked a lot about in press releases and in various presentations, a culture of service. And so what does that mean? And I just spoke to this. To me, the USTA, in my listening tour when I started, I heard a lot of people comment that many times the USTA was perceived as only promoting and growing, again, USTA tennis. And to me, we have to serve all tennis. And we do that through partnerships. I don't like the words mandate and requirements because that's not a collaborative culture. So to me, it's a partnership culture. And through our TIU and outreach programs like this, I hope we see that culture evolving and developing into one of partnership. We need to reduce barriers to entries to tennis. I think an example of that is we recently eliminated a lot of our membership fees. To me, we don't want to tax people to play tennis. We want to make it very affordable for people to play tennis. We don't want complicated digital systems and complicated hoops to jump through to play our sport. So the more barriers we can reduce, I think it's better for our sport. And I would challenge all of us to think that way, not just the USTA. And then again, the overall industry, the health of the industry is how we need to measure our success, not just the overall health of certain programs to determine if we're successful. It's got to be at all levels of our industry. So to me, that speaks a little bit to what I call about the service, serving the industry and changing that culture. So with that, I am going to go to closing. One thing I do want to talk about, the silver lining to me around this pandemic is it's become clear tennis is the perfect post-pandemic activity or sport. This was by medical experts in Texas. I saw this similar report in Minnesota. If you think about tennis coming out of the pandemic, it's the perfect social distancing sport. We actually say physically distancing sport because you're still socializing. It's fun, it's exercise, and it's intellectually stimulating. And those are all the things we missed when we were in quarantine and hibernating in our homes. So to me, tennis is primed to come out of this better than ever. We saw entry-level rackets at mass merchants have nearly doubled in the last 90 days. And we just saw a sports marketing survey report that last year, spring 2019, 6.7% of the US population played tennis. Spring 2020, 10.1% of the population has played tennis at least once. So we know new people are coming to the sport. And with this community on this call, it's up to us to make sure we continue to engage and retain them as they come into this sport. So hopefully I didn't talk too much and go too fast, but I did want to share with you what the USTA is up to right now and how we're trying to partner with the broader industry. So with that, I'm going to ask Rebecca to moderate the Q&A, and I know some questions were provided to us in advance. So with that, Rebecca, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Mike. The general 4 questions are listed there, and I'm happy to sort of go through them. But let's start off the first question with a quote from Billie Jean King, who said, "In life, champions adjust." So Mike, you've done quite a bit of adjusting in your first year as CEO at USTA. So as you're thinking about 2020 to date, what would you consider to be your biggest accomplishment? And what are you looking forward to most in the future as it relates to tennis and to the USTA?
Yeah, so Rebecca, thanks for the question and whoever submitted it. I think the thing I'm proudest of the most is what I call the collaboration and partnership. And if you think about all levels of our organization, if you think about the tennis industry united, right? We've brought the PTR, the USPTA, the TIA, the ITA, and the ATA together to get through this pandemic. And it's been a great partnership. At the USTA and community tennis level, I couldn't be happier with the 17 sections and how welcoming they've been and supportive of everything we're trying to do. And then at the professional level, the WTA, the ATP, and our fellow peers at the other Grand Slams, we've had regular contact with everyone. So to me, that's the thing I'm most grateful for and proud of over the last 8 months. This is how the industry's come together during a tough time. And going forward, I touched on that a few minutes ago. I do honestly and sincerely believe the pandemic could be to tennis what Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs were to tennis in the 70s, and that people are going to realize through this what a great sport we have, and hopefully we see our sport really grow at double-digit numbers over the coming years.
Hope so also. And you did speak about the Tennis Industry United and the process in creating that. If you'd like to elaborate on that a little bit more, and more importantly, how you feel bringing the tennis industry together helps the game now and in moving forward.
Yeah, so the tennis industry was formed to help us weather the COVID storm, and as we're hopefully coming out of that, we as an industry, Tennis Industry United, quickly realized what should be our guiding principles or initiatives and mission going forward. And it was very organic, and it happened really quick in one phone call. Everyone on the call right away jumped to two things we need to do. We need to be all advocates for our sport and do a better job of advocating for tennis. And secondly, we have to drive and improve the diversity of our sport at all levels. So as we're moving out of our work streams around coronavirus and the pandemic, we're now focusing on those two initiatives around advocacy for tennis and improving diversity and inclusion of our sport. So I'm excited going forward with Tennis Industry United.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you also mentioned diversity and inclusion, and there have been so many conversations in 2020 that are really important, especially those that are relate to race and equality. And you did touch on the importance of diversity and inclusion in our organization. If you could also speak to perhaps how you think that relates to growing tennis and to creating the strongest organization possible as we look to the future.
Yeah, again, we have talked about it, but I think we ultimately fail if our sport of tennis doesn't reflect our broader country. And again, to me, it's at all levels. I think historically, we've made some progress, but it's been in pockets, right? Sometimes we focus on our board, sometimes we focus on our staff, sometimes we focus on our sections. And to me, those are initiatives, but we need a cultural shift where it hits all levels of our industry. And as I mentioned earlier, it starts with the tennis playing population, goes to our volunteer base, it then goes to all our constituents within the industry, and then within the USTA family, it goes to our sections, our national staff, and again, our board. So to me, I think everyone is very supportive of it. We just now have to have very key projects and programs in place to make that happen.
Yeah, agree. And lastly, we all know the mission of the USTA is to promote and develop the growth of tennis. And on this session alone, there are over 200 tennis providers who share that exact same passion.
Right.
Can you please talk a little bit about the importance of our provider network and getting more people to play this game? And how can we work together to make that happen?
Yeah, it's one of the things I feel most passionate about is the provider network for multiple reasons. Over the years of the USTA, we've had some really good programs on attracting people, but as everyone knows, we have a leaky bucket. So we have to make sure people have a good experience when they come into our sport, and we're able to engage and retain them for the long haul. And it starts with great providers. We have great providers now, but we need more providers. We have roughly 15,000 certified accredited providers in the United States, which is a fraction of what we need. We almost need to double that number in the coming years. So to me, that's very important. And also, to me, growing tennis doesn't start in a boardroom or a meeting room. It starts on the court. And our providers are the ones who are on the court. And I would challenge everyone in our industry, if you're in an industry, you have a passion for tennis and a familiarity with tennis, there's no reason we can't all get on the courts and start bringing new people to the sport. Because we know it's not an ad campaign that's necessarily going to be something that brings someone to the sport, or a strategic plan that's going to bring someone to the sport. It's all of us putting the rackets in the hands of individuals and making sure they have a good experience with it. And then we give them a clear pathway to come back and continue to enjoy our sport long term. Because once you get over that learning curve and get hooked on it, we know we don't lose people too much at that point, and it's the best sport of a lifetime. And we always say you can start when you're 5, 6 years old and play all the way up into your 90s. So we have a great sport. We just got to get people over that hump initially and get them hooked. And it starts with our providers. So to me, I was so excited when you shared with me how many providers were going to be on this call, that it was super important to be part of it.
And we're so grateful to have them there and to have you present this as well. So thank you so much. Ben, can I pass it back to you?
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike and Rebecca. And I need to echo what Mike shared a few moments ago about the importance of our providers. Providers such as the clubs, the community tennis associations, NJTL chapters, parks, schools, and teaching professionals, as Mike mentioned, really are the lifeblood of tennis, and a huge reason why Middle States, the entire USTA, and the whole sport of tennis can be so successful, and where there's so much opportunity for growth moving forward. I mentioned a little bit before, USTA Middle States really is a strong advocate for our provider network through initiatives such as our community tennis grants, our Premier Provider Recognition Program, and most recently through the creation of an initiative earlier this year called Building a Tennis Community. And through our Building a Tennis Community initiative started earlier this year, our section has infused over $175,000 back into the community directly to our providers through additional grants, facility stimulus support, program incentives, and marketing support. In addition, over $200,000 that the USTA provided for facilities assistance for indoor facilities during the pandemic as well. We have also conducted nearly a dozen digital town hall meetings to educate our providers about Tennis Industry United, as Mike just spoke about, facility recovery grants, advocacy in reaching out to the governor's office on how best to return to the game in a safe and healthy way, as well as working with our indoor facilities as to how best they can reintroduce the sport in a safe and healthy way as the weather gets cooler. All of that will continue in Middle States when this conference is over. We are always looking to create meaningful service-based relationships with our providers. And when this conference is over, we hope to continue those conversations with all of you in both a group and one-on-one basis through your TSRs or the rest of our staff and volunteer base. We hope many of you reach out and give feedback and give us the chance to continue to work closely with you. This continuous outreach and communication with our provider network really helped us put together the tennis conference as a way to continue giving back and collaborating with our partners across the section and beyond. As we discussed earlier, and Evan mentioned at the beginning as well, we have a fantastic lineup of sessions throughout the rest of the month and look forward to your continued support and participation. And Mike, at the beginning of the session, you mentioned that Jen Brady was going on court at noon, and you know, timing is everything. Jen Brady is actually from Middle States, from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Right. And she's actually up a break as I'm checking my phone in the first set. She's up 5-2 and hopefully on her way to winning the first set. And actually now it's 5-3 and she's about to serve for the first set. So a little US Open update as well as a Middle States connection with Jen Brady playing. And Mike, I just want to thank you very much again for your time and all that you're giving to the organization and the tennis industry. We very much appreciate you making the time for this session. And when we were talking before, you mentioned about the red shirt. We'll be sending you a USTA Middle States red collared shirt in the mail so you can represent USTA Middle States at future meetings and participation. But I want to pass it back to our tennis conference coordinator, Evan Schreiner, who's done a fantastic job organizing this entire event. And I want to pass it back to him to wrap up the session.
All right. Thanks, Ben, and Mike and Rebecca. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's a busy time for everybody, and it's great that we were able to get some leaders in our industry together for the session. So honestly, I cannot thank you everybody enough for taking the time out and doing this. But I hope you all have enjoyed this session as we kicked off the month-long tennis conference. We hope to see you at other sessions throughout September as we present on topics related to community tennis, player development, adult programming, our Serve Tennis platform, and much more. Make sure to join us next Monday as we'll have 2 more State of the Union addresses, one from the USPTA CEO, John Embry, and one from the PTR CEO, Dan Santorum. Again, we thank you so much for attending our opening session, and we hope to see you at some of our other ones coming up soon.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Mike.